Good evening, YouTube, BookTube, the world. This is Johnny. Having a glass of wine. Reading. This is a Friday. So I was thinking this is a Friday Reads. It is Friday, March the 15th, 2019. It is 6:29 here in Michigan. It is 69 degrees inside the Hermit Hut. Yeah, it's I kind of look at our house. We've lived here about 28 years. This house was built in 1952, around that time, the year I was born. So this house is going on 67, 68 years old. We know of 3 families that lived in this house. But I've always been kind of curious who the first people were who built this house and lived in it. So I don't really know. But anyway, I call this house the Hermit Hut because I am a hermit and I'm living in the American wasteland. It's kind of like it says, I was just thinking of that verse in 1 Peter, if I can remember. I haven't looked at it in a long time. It says, oh, maybe it's 2 Peter. Oh, I can't remember now. Where he kind of addresses them as strangers and pilgrims. Oh, here it is. It's in 1 Peter, which is the New Testament, the first epistle of Peter, the Apostle Peter. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to the pilgrims or sojourners, temporary residents of the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, elect according to the foreknowledge of God the Father and sanctification of the Spirit for obedience and sprinkling of the blood of Jesus Christ. Grace to you and peace be multiplied. So the Apostle Peter addresses these Christians and these churches as sojourners and pilgrims. And so that's what I am. I am a pilgrim. I am a sojourner in the wasteland, and this house is the Hermit Hut. It is a Friday, so I'm going to do a Friday Reads. I'm not going to just ramble here. First of all, today, as you all know, I volunteer at the local library used bookstore, which is just 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes from where we live. It's the main library in Ottawa County, and it's a big library. And I volunteer there on Fridays and Mondays from 10 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. And today, nobody really came in today. I don't know why. It's been snowing and raining and slush and cold today. So I had, a couple of weeks ago, I had wanted a book that I had read about this person in the New York newspaper book review section of the New York newspapers, the New York Times review books a couple of weeks ago. And this woman was an editor there in England, but over the years she wrote memoirs about different stages of her life. And her name was Dana Athill. And as you all know, I like reading memoirs. I like reading biographies, autobiographies, letters. So I was kind of curious about this woman. And so a couple of weeks ago, before I went downstairs to the used bookstore, the Book Nook, I asked if they would search for her books in the library system. They have interlibrary loan at our local library. They can get books from all over Michigan. And they got me I decided on like a selection of her memoirs, and this is what I got. And I checked it out before I went down into the book nook this morning. Life Class, the selected memoirs of Diana Athill, with an introduction by Ian Jack. So I checked this out before I went down to the book nook, and this is what I read when I was at the book nook today. And I read 37 pages. She wrote memoirs of all different stages of her life. So the one I read this morning was her memoir that she wrote about her childhood, which I think was titled Then. And she wrote up into her death. I think she died. She lived to be in her 90s, and she wrote a memoir right towards the end of her life. She could still be alive. Now I can't remember right now, but she wrote a memoir right in her old age about what's it like growing old and being old. She never married. She was an editor. She lived a full life. I mean, anyway, this is what I checked out of the library this morning. This is what I read at the book nook. Life Class selection from the memoirs of Diana Athill. And this is what I'm going to read this weekend. This is Friday Reads, what you're going to read this weekend. So I'm going to read that. And then when I got home this afternoon, I wrote in my paper diary. I ended on page 239. So when I got home, I read, I've been reading once again this. Well, when I got home, I wrote in my diary, I watched BookTube, I looked at the news, I listened to some music, wrote in my diary, ate some food. Carol called me around, I wrote it down when she called me. She called me around 5:04 here, Michigan time. There in Seattle, Washington, it was 2 o'clock. And I was wondering why she hadn't called. But this morning, her and Hannah, our daughter-in-law, and Modica, little Modica Rose, went to the zoo. And then they went out for pie. So tomorrow morning, Carol flies out of Seattle early in the morning for Denver, Colorado, where she's going to spend 5 days with our daughter Bethany and her husband Andy and Louisa, who just today turned 5 years old. And then there's Margaret, who I think is 4, and then Jack, who just turned 2, something like that. And then she flies back Thursday and lands into Grand Rapids on Thursday afternoon, 3:30. If the weather is nice, I will drive to Grand Rapids and pick her up. If the weather is bad, then Emily, our daughter-in-law, who will be working in Grand Rapids before she comes home, will swing by the airport and pick her up. So if all goes well and the world does not come to an end, my wife will be home next week. Things will get back to normal. So yeah, I've been reading The Merry Men, a novel by Carolyn Chute. I've been reading this pretty steady the last couple of days. I've read 185 pages. I've read interviews with Carolyn Chute. She lives off the grid in Maine. She is kind of back to the land type. They live in like an old house out in nowhere in Maine, no electricity. I don't think any kind of internet or TV or anything. And she's been writing since the 80s, and she continues to write. Her books don't get a lot of, you don't hear about, like, you don't hear her novels talked about in BookTube. But I first came across her several years ago. I saw an interview with her on PBS, and then I saw one of her novels that she's famous for, The Beans of Egypt, which was made into a movie back in the 80s, and then she wrote some other novel, and then she wrote The Merry Men, and she's written 2 other novels after she wrote The Merry Men. She wrote 3 other novels. And she continues to write, even though she doesn't get really commercial. She's not wealthy. She's still poor. She probably gets enough to put food on the table. She married this guy named Michael. He never learned to read. He's a handyman. And she has dogs, and she's really kind of like into militia. She's not a right-wing extremist, but she's kind of like in that group that wants Maine to succeed from the Union, become their own separate nation. She's just kind of interesting. But what I really admire about her is that she keeps writing. She's a writer. See, if you're a writer, and I've said this many times in my videos, if you're a writer, a true writer, you're going to write. You don't care what the critics say. You don't care if you make tons of money. You just write. And she writes. And she writes. One thing I like about her novel, she has an original voice. You can tell when you read her. Now, I read parts of The Beans of Egypt a long time ago. But when I saw this at Salvation Army a couple of days ago, when I bought this, I bought it for 90 cents. And, but as I've been reading it, she has her own unique voice. You can tell she's just enjoying writing. You can just hear her own voice. And she's just kind of interesting, her view of the world. She writes about the people, well, all the novels center around Egypt, Maine, except one. I think The Snowman doesn't. But I think maybe he's from Egypt, Maine, but I'm not sure about that. And so she talks about all these people, these different clans, these different group of families, and these characters in the town of Egypt, Maine, and they're poor. But, you know, she doesn't really stress that they're poor. You just, when you read it, you know that they are, but they're hardworking. They have human dignity. And she writes about the land. She talks about the woods. She talks about the mountains. She talks about the rivers. She talks about the different people in this town. Some are what we consider rich and some are poor. But she doesn't really glorify either class or social group. She just talks about these different families. When you open the novel, for example, she has a partial cast of characters. And these are the main characters. And then as you're going through the novel, these characters, you read about their lives, their marriages, their relationships, their jobs, who their family members, if they're uncles and aunts or sisters or brothers or cousins, or they're kind of intermarried. And these people in Egypt, Maine, they're all kind of somehow connected from not only from families in the time period, but from way back in the 19th century. So it's kind of interesting. It's considered a working class novel. It's a proletarian. It's about common people, but I don't know about that. Some people consider Merry Men to be a political novel, but I see she has some political commentary, but it's not overwhelming. It's there among all the other stories in the novel. But anyway, I'm kind of immersing myself in this as I wait for my wife to come home. I'm trying to use this, The Merry Men, the novel by Carolyn Chute, as a way to not think about my wife being gone and being separate from me. So, as far as what else I've been reading, I haven't really been reading my Christian books. I've been kind of like this morning before I went to the book nook. I got up and I basically just dozed until about 8:15, 18:20, not 18, 8:20, until I had to get ready to go to the book nook. I didn't really read anything. I get up in the morning, I eat breakfast, some cereal or oatmeal, and then I go to the internet, the main computer in the living room, and I look at news, and I look at my email, and I look at BookTube. I watch videos. I see if I got any comments on my videos, and I try to answer all my comments. Yeah, because I like the interaction with the people who subscribe to me. And I watch BookTube videos. And then I've been... but in the mornings, I really haven't been reading anything. I suppose it's because I have so much on my mind in the morning from what I've read in the past on the Epistle of Romans and all those things I showed you in past books this week. I'm kind of digesting it all, letting it settle in my mind. So, plus I write in my diary. I spend a lot of time just sitting in silence, praying, meditating. I don't really, it's kind of interesting, since my wife has been gone, I haven't really listened to that much music. I kind of like the stillness and the quiet. I don't like anything interfering on my mind. It's kind of like I get lost in the novel, The Merry Men, and I think about my life, and I think about when I was alone, the times I've been alone in my life. I was always kind of a loner, like I said, before I got married to Carol. I had girlfriends. I never had any really male friends. I was always just girlfriends. And when I wasn't with my girlfriends, I was by myself. Now, I lived at a rescue mission on Skid Row, but not all the years I was a volunteer there. I've told those stories where I lived out in the woods in a tiny little shack off and on for about 10 years. But I've always been, so it's kind of like my son's just down the street. Our oldest son, Caleb John, and his wife, Emily, and our two little granddaughters, Josephine and Cora, just down the street. I haven't seen them in 7 days. I haven't heard from them. They haven't called. Now they know I've said to them I like being alone, so I know that's why they haven't called, because they know that I like being alone, even though I do get lonely. Now I might hear from them this weekend. I don't know. They might invite me over for dinner. I don't know. Carol calls, but it's kind of, and I just kind of stay kind of mellow. I don't know. It's kind of like Carol said, she's been praying for me. My wife's been praying for peace of mind. I don't know. I felt good. I've been feeling okay. It might get more stressful as I get towards Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because then I know that she's coming back, and I get kind of just wanting her near me. Also, what I plan to read this weekend, I haven't mentioned this, but I have been reading the collected stories of Machado Diaz, translated by Margaret, Jull, Costa. I've been reading these off and on for a couple of months. And yesterday I started trying to finish a story I started a couple of weeks ago called The Alienist. It's a big story. So I plan to finish that story this weekend. So I plan to read this. I kind of read this to get my, I get tired of reading The Merry Men or reading something else. I read this. I also went to thrift stores yesterday, and I won't show all the books I got at thrift stores, but I did find a novel by Machado Diaz called The Epitaph of a Small Winter. I was kind of pleased to find this. It's in perfect condition. Only cost me 50 cents. It has a foreword by Susan Sontag. As you all know, I collect the writings of Susan Sontag, her journals, her essays, her novels, biographies. She has a biography coming out in the spring. Somebody wrote a biography on Susan Sontag that I have on the pre-order. So I'm not going to plan to read this, but I'm glad I found it. As far as what I plan to read in the morning, if I really get my crap together, is Exalted Above the Heavens, The Risen Ascended Christ by Peter C. Orr. Embracing Contemplation, Reclaiming a Christian Spiritual Practice edited by John H. Cole and Kyle C. Strobel. Preaching Romans, Four Perspectives by Scot McKnight and Joseph P. Modi, I can't pronounce it, editors. And this is supposed to be my March Mammoth, which I have not gotten into. I've only read 317 pages, and it's over 1,442 pages. But I'm just meditating upon what I've read, and of course I said I get kind of sidetracked, and I read other things on Romans and read about the Apostle Paul and his life and his theology and all kinds of stuff. Plus, I'm always writing in my diary. That's one thing I wanted to say too in this video. I am a writer. Now, I'm not a professional writer. I haven't published anything. I'm not a poet. I'm not a novelist. I write in my diaries. And I write in my online diaries. So I spend a lot of time doing that. And I'm into photography. I'm into those kinds of things. I look at making videos is not my priority. What my priority is my writing. I love to write, and that's why I spend a lot of time writing. Not only in my paper diary, but I write in my online diaries. Now, as I said, I just write in crooked fingers in LiveJournal, and then I paste what I write there into my 3 other online diaries. But I write more in my online diary, Crooked Fingers, than I do in my other diaries. In my online diary, Crooked Fingers, I'll paste in photos, I'll paste in my videos, what I make for BookTube, I'll paste in, music videos, I'll paste in maybe essays or book reviews or whatever. And I've been doing that since March of 2001. So these things occupy my time. So I do those things on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Next week, Monday, I don't know. Monday I go back to the Book Nook. But I plan to read this weekend The Merry Men by Carolyn Chute. I'll finish this short story by Machado Diaz. I'll read some more of this memoir by Deanna Athill. Life Class, The Selected Memoirs of Deanna Athill. And I'll read my Christian books, get back into the Epistle of Romans, Preaching Romans, Four Perspectives. I'll write in my diary. I'll watch the birds, and I will dwell within my hermit hut, seeking to live for the glory of God. That's about it. I thought about going to a book sale in Grand Rapids tomorrow. But if I go to Grand Rapids, I'll probably go, if I went to a book sale, then I go to all the bookstores, and then I probably just spend a lot of money on books that I don't think I even read the books I bought last year at this book sale in Grand Rapids. It's around the time of March. It's a library used book sale, Cascade Public Library. It's east of Grand Rapids. And if I was to go there, then I would go to Schuler Books, I would go to Barnes & Noble, I go to Baker Bookhouse. I would just buy all kinds of books, spend probably over $100, maybe $200, and come home with a bunch of stuff, and they would just sit down the lower level and gather dust. So I don't know. Plus I have plenty to read right now. And so yeah. So I hope you're having a good Friday evening, that you have a good weekend. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the new subscribers. Free to ask me questions. And one thing I want to clarify, I am a writer, I am a bookworm, and I am a book collector, and I am a Christian, and I talk about Christian books. And I'm not here to debate, I'm not here to argue, I'm not here to persuade anybody to my world and life view, my Christian theological and spiritual views. I'm just here to be human, to be a man of God, and to be real, to speak from my heart, not to be phony or fake or plastic, but to be authentic as I live my life out in the presence of a holy God. So till next time, maybe tomorrow I'll make a video, show those used books I got at thrift stores. I don't know, we'll see. So have a good evening. Until next time, bye.